And good morning, everybody. Welcome to Hardcore Metal Detecting's Coffee with Craig and Derek. We're on going to be doing these shows in the morning here. Topic today is we were talking about a little bit about ground balancing your metal detectors, and it's not so much about individual detectors. We will go into a little bit of detail with that as far as brands and how you ground balance them, but it's pretty much the importance of ground balancing and how you can use the ground balancing on your detector to increase performance, increase depth in certain situations, and how we use them more often than not. Craig and I, well, I think Craig, I'm speaking for you too a little bit, but more often than not, Craig and I do a manual ground balance. One of the things that I see, and I guess it's the way it's worded. If you're new to metal detecting, or I've even seen guys that are experienced that do this. When they tell you, usually you have to set your detector up. Certain ones you have to turn certain knobs to make them neutral, essentially. And it always says to pump the coil. And I see guys do this, and they literally are forcing the coil up and down, Craig. I know you've probably seen it too. And really, when they're talking about pumping the coil, is you're raising it or lowering it down to the ground, about within an inch of the ground, and raising it up about 6 inches. And you're just doing it just like that. It doesn't have to be a fast thing or forceful thing or whatever.
Yeah, you want to a little bit more gently, and give the machine a chance to, analyze the ground. I think if you do it too fast, it has a hard time analyzing the ground because you're going up, you're having that dead space in between, but it's not a race. You want to just, it's really important. I think it's one of the more, some people neglect, doing it right. I think.
Yeah.
I see it with this Equinox. People are telling people, "Oh, you don't need the ground balance. You just put it on, zero, and that's fine."
And it really isn't.
I was thinking, no, I didn't. And there was, I guess, this guy Clive Klutnick was, explaining, that a lot of times you're in a site and the ground will change, from, spot to spot, and you can go 20 feet and the ground could, change dramatically. You don't know, you don't even notice it unless, you got the ground balance, but they recommend tracking, on the Equinox is the best mode to use, but there's 3 different ways you can ground balance it. But
and essentially with ground balancing, I should say, it's to make the ground neutral. You have mineralization, you have stuff in the ground. You want to find a clean spot that doesn't have nails or any kind of ferrous or non-ferrous material. Ferrous being iron, non-ferrous being your copper, gold, brass, silver, what have you. You want to find an area, a small little area that doesn't have anything that you can hear a beep on when you start to manually ground balance. And you're trying to eliminate the ground as the detector from detecting the ground, essentially. I'm trying to put this as simple as possible. But, like Craig said, it's not a race. If you take 2 minutes, and it doesn't even take that long to ground balance your detector, take your time, raise and lower the coil at a reasonable speed, not like crazy fast, and make your adjustments. And some detectors have fine tuning for this. If you get it perfectly ground balanced, where it's nice and silent, it's not making a bunch of racket, or it's making the same noise. Some of the detectors, and I've noticed this with the Bliss tool with the Beach Hunter ID from White's, some of them will make the beep noise or the distortion noise as you lower the coil to the ground, and that means you need to lower your ground balance knob or whatever. You need to lower the ground balance. If it makes the noise when you lift the coil up off the ground to 6 inches, then you need to raise the increase your ground balance, and you want to find that happy medium. That in most cases, that means your machine is totally neutral to the ground, and you can start detecting. In a normal ground, you're probably good for a half an hour. You should do it every half hour anyways. Like Craig said, you hit sites that are busy, or a lot more stuff. The ground changes as you move 30 feet this way or 30 feet that way. I don't run into this in Florida so much, but like, Craig, up where you're at, I'm sure if you hit like, an area where they've done a lot of, there may not be the original soil there or whatever, you may have mineralized soil, you would have to do this more often, and you should be able to tell. I remember mine would get busy, that get chatty, the detector would.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, we have more what I call cross contamination, from different eras. I deal with, like my yard, I got square nails that are dating back to the probably 1740s.
Right.
That's when, the first people got here. But it's like, I live on Main Street, and it was a part of a railroad at the time too. So you're dealing with all kinds of carbon from coal. That's the biggest thing I've been dealing with, and it's kind of been an eye opener. I started I was doing pretty good with the Equinox going back over the yard, and then it kind of slowed down. I took the Bliss tool and I started thinking outside the box, and I started, deciding to kind of run it like the Equinox with the instead of running, manual ground balance, I did an auto.
Right.
And because there's so much coal in the ground, it's like a lot of areas of my yard, it's almost like kind of a blackish gray dirt when you start digging down. And I've had bullets at 5 inches that were hard to dig, hard to hear. I even tested a couple of machines. I remember I got this, I was hunting with the Deus, and I got this squeak, and I had to maneuver the coil over the signal in order to get the thing to even squeak at all. And in some places it was nulling completely. And I went and got the Bliss tool, and I was getting the signal, but it was a little bit choppy. It was completely repeatable, but it didn't. It sounded the same every single time, but it was a little bit choppy.
Right.
And I could swing the coil, all the way over it. Still got the same signal. So I thought, got to be a good signal, and it turned out to be a 69 caliber 3-ringer, which is a huge bullet. We call them fatties, and it was like maybe 5.5 inches deep, and it should have been a banging signal.
Right.
And it was it was just, this coal this carbon it's like it's almost like a different type of mineralization. It's just mineralization. If you put too much power in the ground, it just like it echoes it back so much that you can't really penetrate. So I started running the machine a lot lower. You can't run a machine real high, with real high sensitivity in mineralized ground. Once you get it back ground balance, then there's another factor where you got to set the sensitivity. The worst thing is to have a chatty machine, especially if you're in an area where you've hit it a lot and there's not a lot of signals left. There's a chatty, you can miss a soft signal because the machine is chatty. And I think too many people, run the machine too high in that situation, trying to squeeze something out. So I've done a lot of tests. Yeah, sometimes it is, and sometimes if the machine is totally stable, that's the best way to go.
That's what I tell people a lot.
If you got good ground, you can kind of tweak it up a little bit, and you might run the thing a little bit more hot, where your gain and sensitivity is a little bit higher.
Well, you also could do what they call a positive ground balance. I've done this with the Bliss tool. Some of the Sorrow, probably you can do this with a lot of the analog machines. I'm not sure about the Equinox and E-Track and Whites and stuff like that. I don't know if I ever really tried it.
The Equinox, you can actually set the ground balance. Some people are going negative in good ground slightly, and it gives it a boost. I know the Deus, they do it on the Deus also. The Deus has got you can do pumping, you can do tracking, and you can just do the numbers if you want on the and change it manually on the numbers on the on the dais.
And this is
So,
not for, when you turn on and go, guy. If you're new to the hobby or new to your detector, and you're just trying to get your mind wrapped around what the detector's doing. I mean, it's fine to run presets. It's fine to run the automatic ground mounts. And it will track itself. Now there is on some detectors you need to be careful on the automatic ground balance. Just because you put it in automatic ground balance doesn't mean it's going to track right off the bat. Sometimes you have to do another procedure. Just make sure you've read the manual on it or watched some videos to see the process for going to automatic ground balance. That will change as the ground changes. Now, what we're doing with the manual, why Craig and I like it so much, is because it keeps it at one point. If you're in good ground or decent ground, it's not real mineralized, it's probably better to go to the manual side. But understand that if you are totally ground balanced, you're already losing depth a little bit. It's that's why Craig and I go to the positive side of ground balance, and Craig mentioned it before the show about good ground, low mineralization. You can actually go to the negative side and actually be a little bit better, a little bit more depth and stuff. Now you run into that catch-22 there, where it could get chatty on you. Detector making, not falsing real bad, but it is obviously making more noise. That's when you would want to stop.
Yeah, you don't want to go down. Yeah, like on the dais, you don't want to go down too many numbers
Right.
below the regular ground balance. But
it's a fine tune type thing.
Yeah, it's we used to do the Soros. You could do negative ground balancing, but you couldn't go. You had to go. You couldn't use all metal. You had to pinpoint and discriminate.
Right.
But you could actually in good ground. You could actually. We used to hear the threshold and then back off till you couldn't hear it, and then swing that way, and it would give you a good inch or two more depth, like on a silver dime or something.
And one thing too, I just thought about this, and this works with the Bliss Tool detector, Craig, is if you remember when I was with Ahmed over in Bulgaria, and he was showing me this ground balance, or I think I videoed it, about, once you ground balance your machine, then take a few practice swings. That's why it's important to have a clean area. Swing back and forth to see, it's already clean already because you already checked it. If it starts making any noise as you're swinging the detector normally, the coil right there about an inch off the ground, what have you, you may need to make a finer adjustment. And it sounds, it's kind of like you're just tuning everything in perfectly, the best that you can to start your hunt. Like I said, this takes a minute or two. It probably doesn't even take that long, Craig. I mean, you do it enough times and it's second nature to you. Your first couple of times, you're going to take more time to do it because you haven't done it so much. But it is very important to do this, and you're going to find, depending on what detector you have, you can actually use ground balance as an adjustment to knock out hot rocks. Hot rocks are mineralized rocks. They can be real small, but they will set your detectors off, VLF detectors. And what I had found, I think the Sorrel will do it, the Blista will do it, you can actually ground balance the machine to one of those hot rocks and knock them out altogether, so you don't get anything or very little noise from a hot rock. You're only going to get it from an actual target, a non-ferrous or ferrous target, depending on how you have your discrimination set up. You could probably do the same thing with coal, Craig. I never even thought about that, or that soil. Essentially, that's what you're doing anyways. When you ground balance a Bliss tool on that, you're turning, it's probably at not near ferrite ground. Of course, we haven't even talked about ferrite ground balancing either, but you would move up your ground balance knob or button or whatever up a few notches to knock out that mineralization. And I kind of brought it up early, but we do.
Yeah, I had.
Oh, good.
I had some hot rocks in my yard and some up the street in that spot where I found the Real, but it seemed like the Deus picked those things up as a good signal, repeatable.
Right.
whereas I didn't seem to hear them at all with the Equinox, and then the same with the Bliss Tool. Sometimes I would get kind of like a scratchy signal on one of those hot rocks, but it wasn't a signal I wanted to dig.
Right, almost like an interference.
And it also, even on the dais, it sounded weird. I mean, it was like a high pitched, hollow kind of sound. It just didn't sound like a normal, signal.
Right.
It had like a weird,
wobble
kind of repeatable signal to it. Yeah, but it just real bright kind of signal. But it just didn't sound like a normal signal that you get. But if you dig a few hot rocks, I don't think that's a big deal unless the whole area is full of them. But one or two every once in a while is not that big a deal. But if you're running into a lot of hot rocks, it can be annoying.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and we do what we call a ferrite ground balance, and I've done this with the Beach Hunter ID and several other detectors, the Sorrow and Bliss Tool and stuff, where you can take a piece of ferrite, and ferrite's this stuff that some of your computer cords, you have that little round tube thing around the cord.
Yeah, I've actually done it with a refrigerator mag.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it's like a ceramic magnet, and I use that on the Bliss Tool, and it's very easy to you just kind of sweep the piece of magnet across the coil, and adjust it just adjust it that way, and it's usually a much higher, it's a plus,
right,
ground balance. It's
positive, yeah,
more of a positive ground balance, but it'll work. I mean, that's the thing about the Bliss Tool. It can do some other things that other machines can't do. But
ferrite has been something they've been using for a while, especially when you don't have a spot to ground balance at. The ferrite, once you use it on your detector, and it'll work on most detectors that have manual ground balance, and essentially when you lay your detector down on a non-metallic kind of, like a picnic table or something like that, and you can actually move that piece of ferrite, 6 inches away from the top of the coil, and back to the coil, and you can make the adjustments on your machine easier that way. But once you find that spot where it's nice and quiet, if you look at your machine where you have it adjusted at, that's where your ferrite ground balance is going to be all the time. You know what I mean? You can adjust, you can go to a field, and you don't have to keep on doing that every single time you metal detect. If you need to use ferrite, you just put it to that setting, and you're golden. You're good to go. We do this when we're testing machines, depth, like air testing. Is essentially you're just running stuff over the coil in your room or whatever to get the tones or see where it's hitting at, what numbers it's showing. I used to do this a lot. It's not really a good depth indicator. Some detectors will pick up on air tests very easily. Other ones won't. It doesn't really apply to in-ground testing like a test garden or actual live hunts. So don't get confused on that. If you see a detector on a video that, oh my God, they're picking up a quarter at 20 inches away from the coil, that's not necessarily what it's going to do in the field. I know like the Bliss Tool would do that, where you'd run something over the coil, and it's hard to pick up a coil at 12 inches. But in real life, you'll pick up a quarter at 16, 17, 18, 19 inches down in the ground. It wants that ground to fight against to get that signal. It amplifies the signal. So don't fool yourself in that. But it will work for the ferrite ground balance, and that's what you use when you can't use anything else. The automatic's not working real good. It's too noisy. Manual is you just can't find a good spot. You can set it up a ferrite ground balance. It does work. You are going to lose a little bit of depth depending on which detector you're using, but if you can't hunt the spot any other way, it's better to hunt it with something, to get some stuff out of there. Even if it is, maybe you're having a hard time hitting pennies at 8 or 9 inches down, you only hit them at 7. Well, at least you're getting 7 inches down in that ground, considering your detector can't work in that environment unless you do this. and there's nothing wrong with it. You're finding out what the niches of your detector or VLFs and in general. And you probably run into this more, Craig, what at Culpeper, any place with harsh ground. The ground bouncing it. Wet salt sand is another thing. Most of you all.
Yeah, the worse the ground is, the more you got to be on top of your ground balance, and because I remember there was some spots I've been to where the ground was so bad that, like, I remember the Nautilus couldn't pick up a round ball at 1 inch. I'm talking about a 69 caliber round ball. Couldn't even hear it. And the guy came right behind. The only reason I knew that I missed it was the guy came right behind me and with a Spectrum, white Spectrum Eagle. One of the older machines back in the 90s.
Right.
I actually sold him that machine, but I remember he got the signal and he goes, "Hey, Craig," he goes,
"You missed
I
one.
saw you swing." He goes, "You didn't get this signal?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, just got a musket ball." And I go, "Really?" I said, "Put it back in the hole and cover it up. Let me see if I can hear it." I couldn't hear it, and I was like, "Oh my God."
That drives you nuts too. When that happens, that drives you insane, because it's like, okay, how much have I missed today? It's like, you just wasted my time, or I did, whatever.
And the funny thing was, this ground was all shale, and just it'd been a mining area. There'd actually been placer gold found there, and there was like these weird stains in the rocks, reddish brown and black stains, just strange looking rocks. And it was big cliffs. This place was up on the top of a cliff, and but right above a creek. But the ground was just some places it was worse than others. But I remember years later I went back with a Minelab Explorer, and I'd found 50 buttons. And I think maybe 3 coins. I got a 1 real. I got I think a 1809 half cent, and a 1774 King George the third.
Right.
But I went back with the Explorer, and I ended up finding about 300 or 400 more buttons, and 2 cut reals. One I got with the Deus and one I got with the Explorer. But one thing was, I found that the newer machines, seemed to ground balance a lot better than the older machines did.
Yeah.
That was a big problem in the old days. Some of those machines, it was really hard to, get any depth in the bad ground.
Yeah,
so
these newer ones do everything. I was going to say, the new ones, they're a lot easier, a lot more user friendly than the older machines were. I think in some ways, because we I hear some of them, Craig, oh my God, this thing has a lot of adjustments on it and everything. But the presets and everything aren't bad. The automatic ground balances works probably a hell of a lot better than it did 20 years ago, as far as the actual adjustments of it. So it is easier nowadays to do this stuff and to get your mind wrapped around it. I think the most important thing is watch some videos, or at least read the manual on the ground balance part of your metal detector. Even you veterans out there, Craig and I, man, I tell you what, we tear apart a manual. I want to know everything that machine, all the little fine print, so to speak, because you never know when it might apply to where you're hunting at, especially if you travel. I was going bouncing around to Tennessee, to Virginia, to South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. I mean, all this ground is different. It's never the same anywhere in the country. The ground's always a little bit different. And something you read about a certain kind of adjustment or whatever, whether it's discrimination or whatever, may help you in your particular area where it doesn't help a lot of others. And, this is just messing with your detector to get used to it, to understand what it's doing so you can get the best performance out of it. Because if you're happy hunting just in presets and you're just going out once a month and whatever, kicking back and, going detecting, you're okay with running presets. That's fine. But if you're, really into the hobby and, relic hunting and really looking for stuff, you want all the advantages you can get, because you can have the best detector in the world, but if you don't know what you're doing with it, you might as well have a, $29.95 metal detector. It's not going to be, well, I shouldn't say 29. You know what I mean, Craig? You might as well get the performance you got in your detector. Why spend the money on it?
The higher end detectors have, better discrimination, better ground balance than usually.
Recovery delay and correlate and all these adjustments. It sounds confusing if you're new to the hobby, but this is all stuff, this terminology is stuff that you'll get used to hearing and understanding what it does, so that you can, when you pick out your next detector, you know what you're looking for. You want to have, I've always been one to say, if you have adjustments, you have room to grow with the detector. The old Thesaurus and stuff.
Probably
like
one of the worst things you can do is not ground balance a detector properly.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you got to do. I mean and then you got to go in and check, to see how much sensitivity and gain that you can use. And that's another thing. Too many people, use too much gain sometimes, thinking it's going to
help them.
Give them more depth, and sometimes they're using so much gain it's like blocking the ground, blocking the signal from going deeper. It's just
best way to describe
overload.
The way that I've heard about gain.
It.
Yeah, overloading, but like with gain, you were talking about, Craig. The best way for most people to understand it, the way I did, anyways, if you treat gain like you would the volume on your stereo. You know what happens when you turn your stereo all the way up and hit, and try to play music. It distorts. It's all over the place. It sounds bad. So treat gain like you would a volume on a stereo. You only want to use enough to make it sound good. So you only want to use enough to detect with. You don't want to pound it, because it's like, I've heard it explained like high beams in the fog. Using full, gain is like doing that in the fog. You're not going to be able to see as good. If you back it off, it's going to work better. It's going to be smoother. It's going to be
and it'll probably be, if you're running it too high like that, it's probably going to be noisy as heck.
You don't want false.
Because falsing can sound like a weak signal.
Right.
And if you're just sitting there getting nothing but falsings all the time and checking these signals, that's really annoying.
Plus, it gets hypersensitive. You bump the coil and it will go off, and all this stuff. It's it's not an easy, it's not a pleasurable way to metal detect when you have a lot of chatting. Unless you're wanting that, if you want to have that chatting, there's sometimes I do that only because I'm trying to get everything out of an area and I want to hear that kind of stuff, the imperfections, the whisper tones. But it's not something you'd want to do all day long, man. It would drive you insane. Hearing things that sound like signals, but they're not there. It's just a false. With your White's machines, especially most detectors, if the batteries start running low, they start getting hypersensitive, start falsing a lot because the voltage of the batteries is coming down. You need to replace your batteries or recharge, your machine. With the Whites, it was like that too. We're getting a little bit out of the realm, Craig, but we're almost up on time anyways. We just want to run these little half-hour shows. Try to give you guys some pointers, stuff that we've found over the years that works for us. Like I said, if you're new to the hobby, it's probably a little bit foreign language to you, but you'll pick up on it quick. If you want to be the best hunter you can, whether you're coin shooting or relic hunting or treasure hunting, whatever you're doing, knowing your detector, that's more than half of it. It depends on you and how you want to hunt. So, Craig,
we have a hardcore metal detecting Facebook page, so if you have any questions, just come on that page, like the page, and then and follow it, and ask some questions, and we'll get back to you on if you have any problems on things like this.
No, definitely. And Craig does put up a lot of videos and stuff and shares a lot of video. You're more than welcome if you guys have a video of a problem you're having with your detector, put it up on Hardcore. There's plenty of people look at that can help you and figure out what's going on.
And if you have a YouTube channel and you want to promote it a little bit, just I'll put it up on the site. See if we can get you some more subscribers and a few views and stuff. Exactly. It's always nice.
Oh yeah. But anyways, guys,
we're always looking for good videos too. So, but I think we probably need to wrap up the show, huh?
Yeah, probably got to wrap it up. But yeah, we are Hardcore Metal Detecting Radio. Usually we're on every Thursday night and Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's kind of our free-for-all show. Whatever topic comes up, when we talk about it, the show takes its own path and everything. And then we're going to try to do these shows, morning shows, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning, or sometime during that day. Just as, pick out certain topics that we wanted to go into more detail about to help you guys out. And this is stuff that Craig and I talk about all the time. When we'll always bring up one of these topics when we're on the phone or whatever. Just thought it would make, good information for you guys too. So I hope you enjoyed the show and everything. Be sure to like and follow us on Hardcore Metal Detecting Radio there on Spreaker.com. And check out the Facebook page, Hardcore Metal Detecting. Also, Craig does a good job on that, and a lot of information on there too. So I'll catch you later, guys. Get out there, keep digging, and God bless.